I think we'll get started. And if anyone else joins, then we'll do our best to catch them up as they come in. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Walkenfeld. I'm the Chief Learning Officer for Sefaria. And I'm really very happy to be here to speak with you guys today. Sefaria, it's kind of fun to present it to people who maybe don't use it as often as I do. I've been with Sefaria almost since the very beginning, and I would say I probably use it at least multiple times a day. So I'm excited to bring you all into my world. I want to also introduce Lauren Berman, Rabbi Lauren Berman, who's Sefaria's engagement associate, and he's waving over there in the corner. And Lauren is also a longtime Sefaria user and expert, and he will also be helping by answering your questions via chat today, tech support, everything. Lauren will be monitoring the chat so that I can hopefully focus on speaking with all of you. We'll keep everyone muted for now. We will definitely be taking your questions via chat, so please feel free to do that. Just put a note in the chat if you miss something or you have a question or anything like that. And we'll open it up for a couple minutes at the end. Also, if anyone has a question they need to ask out loud and wants to stay on for a few minutes, happy to hear your voices. But chat is the way to go for now. Also, we are recording this webinar, so if you don't want to be recorded for some reason, then turn off your camera and I guess don't say anything. We'll be recording so that anyone who missed this webinar can watch it, and also so that if you miss something, you'll be able to go back to the recording afterwards and check it out and play it back slowly. Today, we're going to cover questions around how to create and format and share a sheet on Sefaria. It's not a Sefaria 101 webinar. We do those also. And we have some of those recorded on our site, and we do those other times. I think the next Sefaria 101 webinar is coming up this coming Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is not my time zone, so don't feel bad if it's not yours either. Lauren will put all the information into the chat. So if you want a Sefaria 101, Basics of How to Use the Library, then you should feel free to join that webinar. This is about, as I said, Sefaria Sheets. And I'm excited to share this information with you. You can either play along now, so I won't feel bad if you seem to be doing something else at the same time as you're in this webinar. You're welcome to open another window and kind of play along, try it out as I'm speaking about it. Or again, you can do it afterwards. You'll be able to go through step by step using the recording, and you can try it out afterwards as well. Again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll stop periodically throughout. And if you have questions after the fact, you're not sure, once you're on your own, you're not sure how to make it through the Sheets process, you're always welcome to write to us at hello, HELLO, at sefaria.org. That's one great way to reach us. And we also have a Sefaria FAQ group, which will be linked on the sheet that I'm going to share with you. Lauren can put the link in the chat as well. And that's also a good way. If you feel stuck, that's a great way to get unstuck. Before I share this sheet with you, I'll just say a few words about source sheets on Sefaria to frame our experience today. Source sheets are probably a bad name for the feature that I'm about to show you, for the feature that exists on Sefaria. Maybe you'll forgive our team for giving it that name. For many, many years, I'm not sure how many years, Jewish educators were making source sheets by hand, with computers, all sorts of ways. And those source sheets were a way of grabbing sources from multiple places. Some of you have some truly wonderful bookshelves behind you that I would love to be able to peruse if you move the camera a little closer. And so it was a great way, these source sheets, to grab, a piece from this book and a piece from that book and put them all together on a single piece of paper and then share them out with a group of people. So we call this feature on Sefaria source sheets. If you have a better name, we're taking suggestions in the chat, but it's really very different from any piece of paper that you've ever experienced. It's really a completely different product. When you create a sheet on Sefaria, it's a user-generated web page, which can include sources from the Sefaria library, from outside texts. It can include other media, and it can include your own comments, questions, reflections, etc. So it would probably be more accurate if we called this building your own Sefaria web page. But our fear, and you can tell me if you think this was accurate, our fear was that if we presented a product to a bunch of Jewish educators and learners of Torah called make your own web page, we would get all these people saying, but I don't make web pages. I'm a Jewish educator, or I'm someone who learns Torah. And then people would be scared off and they would never use the feature. And that seemed like a bad idea. So we didn't go that route. But again, just know that sheets are maybe not the most accurate way of talking about this. And so we'll do our best to kind of correct any misimpressions that are, that might be generated by that name. I'm going to share a source sheet with you in the chat. It's a good example. It's a sheet, but it's not really a source sheet. I made it on Sefaria, but it's just an outline of some of the things that we'll be covering today, and a good resource for you to go back to if you forget what we covered, or you realize you want to go back to the video, but you're not sure where in the progression it was. So I put that in the chat. Hopefully you can open that. And I'm also going to share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can all see my screen now. Here's more or less what we will be covering. So again, sheets are really just web pages. They can contain all these different kinds of media. They're always connected to the Sefaria library. And if you list your sheet on Sefaria, which I'll speak about a little bit later, then it's searchable, which means that you have the opportunity to create Torah that is going to be useful not only to you, not only to the audience that you intend it for, but also potentially to the hundreds of thousands of users that Sefaria has every month. Sheets are very shareable. So even if you don't want to share it with our entire Sefaria community, you can share it digitally with anyone, really. Sheets can always be edited and adapted. That means that you can take your own sheet years later and make whatever changes you'd like. It's pretty easy to do that. It means that someone else can adapt your sheet for their purposes if you share it with them. And it means that changing things between languages is also really, really easy. Sheets are a great way to collect your ideas, teach others, and of course contribute to the Sefaria library. We balance all of those things. You don't always have to be making a contribution to Sefaria when you're creating a sheet, but we know anecdotally that one of the great strengths of Sefaria right now is that anyone can go there and see Torah that was created by so many different people, such a diverse range of Jewish educators and learners, and it's become a great kind of gathering place, a kind of virtual gathering place, virtual Beit Midrash, for everyone's Torah to coexist. We have around 260,000 sheets that have been created on the site, and a little more than 10% are listed. That means they're searchable for you. And over 28,000 Sefaria users have created sheets. So I hope that after this webinar, if you haven't created sheets before, you'll do that, and you'll know that you're in good company with our 28,000 other users. In order to get started, you're going to need to log into your Sefaria account to create a sheet. If you don't already have a Sefaria account, you can sign up for a free account, and there's a link here that will show you how to do that. It's free. It only takes a few seconds. It's really easy to do, but anything that you're going to do that's going to make changes on Sefaria, anytime you want to do any creation or even adapt somebody else's sheet, you're going to need to be signed in. You can see that I'm signed in because my little icon is over here in the corner, my little avatar. And once you sign in, you'll see your initials or your photo if you've put one. And that's how you'll know you're signed in. If I weren't signed in, then Sefaria would be inviting me in this space, hopefully you guys can see that, to either log in or sign up. So those are the options if you're not signed in. And again, you'll need to be logged in order to do that. Sheets are created and edited on the website only, sefaria.org. So this is a question that we sometimes get. What if I made something on Microsoft Word? What if I made something on Google Docs? That's great. Those aren't part of the Sefaria library, at least the way the site is currently set up. But you can always recreate that sheet on Sefaria, and that's a really easy thing to do, because once you get good at this, making Sefaria sheets will be, again, really pretty easy. In order to create a sheet, you'll want to go into your profile page. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. Maybe I'll go to the home page, actually. Here's Sefaria's homepage. It's actually the logged in homepage. So I'm logged into Sefaria right now. And when I click on the icon in the corner, again, that's how I know that I'm logged in. That gets me into my account page. And the button that you want in order to be able to create a sheet is the button that says create a new sheet. If you weren't logged in at that point, Sefaria would ask you to log in, because to be able to make changes, you're going to need to be logged into the site. And this is the place where you would do all your creating, where you can create all different kinds of sheets. You can see that there's a number of different options in terms of what you can add to, again, a Sefaria sheet, but now you know every time you hear me say that word that really I mean a Sefaria web page. You can add a source, which is anything from the library. And I'm going to go over each one of these in depth, don't worry. You can add a text, which is anything that you can copy and paste or type into a sheet. You can add media, which means an image or a YouTube video, a SoundCloud link, an MP3. So your source sheet can play videos, it can play audio, it can display images. And you can add a comment, which is anything else that you want to say. If you're a teacher, this might be your instructions for your students. If you are trying to spark a conversation among peers, it might be the questions that you have about the source, or anything else that you'd like to add. The comment box is a free space to do that. So this is what the new source sheet space looks like, and these are the options that you'll be able to add. I just want to show you a few different examples of source sheets to get your creative juices flowing as we talk about adding all these different kinds of things. Here's a source sheet coming soon, the Chanukiah in the window. Why is it important to publicize Hanukkah? And you can see that this one has both texts. So as I scroll through, you'll see all those texts, as well as things like discussion questions and a little bit of framing for each one of the sources. And that's a really useful thing. It's a really different medium when you're creating a source sheet that's going to go out online. That's different than I'm giving this to you and I'm standing in front of you. If I'm going to be in front of the people who this source sheet is addressing the entire time, then maybe it's okay to just have a bunch of sources on a sheet. But anecdotally, I can tell you, because I speak with Sefaria users all the time, people love finding great sheets on our site. They love it more when there's something beyond just a collection of sources, and there's also questions and narrative and ideas, and that's a really great way to show people what you're thinking and to give them a sense of the flow of the sheet. So that's one example. We also have what we call narrative sheets, which have even more of that writing. This is a source sheet on Yizkor. It comes from our Shavuot on Sefaria group, where we encouraged rabbis and educators to put together, again, not just text, but to really put their voice onto the sheet and give people the experience as though they were in the room with the educator. And so this is very conversational, as you can see. So let's dive into our learning. This includes both outside texts as well as texts that are in Sefaria. So Zachor, which is a book by Professor Yerushalmi, published in 1982. It is still under copyright, and so it's not in Sefaria's library. Sefaria's library is made up of sources that are either in the public domain or licensed to the Creative Commons. We're very, very careful about copyright, and so only certain sources can be in our library. But if you have the time to type out a passage, or you find it as part of an article elsewhere on the internet, or you for some reason have it on your hard drive, you can copy and paste any text in. And so this sheet is a collection of outside sources, inside sources, or sources internal to the library, as well as narrative. Another example that I can show you guys, if I can move the Zoom thing out of the way. Here's a source sheet made by a group on Sefaria that has audio embedded into it, because this is somebody who makes regular podcasts about Daf Yomi. She does a podcast every single day. And so her podcast is actually embedded in with the text. And you can imagine that that's a great way to bring in different media. And we know that some people are more audio learners and some people are more visual learners. So this is a great way to literally have your voice, or whoever's voice you'd like, recorded on the sheet and include that with the sources. And finally, I'll show you I'll show you two more. This one has photography in it, which these are great pictures. I think my favorite source sheets with images actually And these are very beautiful. I like the source sheets with images that have children's artwork included in them, which we also have some great examples of. They're maybe not always as aesthetically pleasing, but they're fun to see, and it's fun to see people's artwork paired with texts. So that's another possibility. And finally, I'll show you just one more type of source sheet, and then we'll dive into the how-to. This is a source sheet about leadership. I think maybe Lauren created this. Lauren, did you create this one? I think so. That invites people to add their favorite text about leadership. And so you can see that different people, their names are in those little blue letters, different people have collaborated on this source sheet. It's what we call an anyone can add sheet. And this is also a great way to bring in other voices, and maybe, again, that word source sheet is so misleading in some ways. I would think of this more as a community discussion board that you can open up to as many or as few people as you'd like. And Sefaria will automatically put their name under the source that they've added. And again, a great way to just bring other voices into the conversation. So that's all to get you excited and to kind of get your juices flowing. I'm going to show you the actual how-tos in just a moment, but first I'll pause to see if there are any questions that I'm not about to give the answers to. Lauren, anything pressing coming in?
I'm responding through the text, but someone had asked about printing, someone had asked about how to find their source sheet, and I'm responding.
Oh, great. I will definitely talk about printing, which is real, and how to find your source sheet is also important. And Lauren, you can go ahead and answer that, but I promise to also show that over the course of this class. Let's talk a little bit about how to actually make a sheet. I also want to show you how they operate in the library, but I'm going to start by taking you into some of the how-tos. So you notice that my sheet says new source sheet, which is not a very exciting title, and it's going to get complicated really quickly if I leave that as the title. So the first thing that I would do is to double click into this field. So it's highlighted in blue. And now I can call this something else. I'm just going to type in a new title. I'll call it the Sheets webinar. I don't want to call it source sheet because I already told you that's not good. So we'll call it the Sheets webinar webpage. Yeah, let's call it that. So now I've titled my source sheet. And the most important thing that I need to do right now is to click save. You can see the save button is in blue in the upper right-hand corner. And as soon as I click it, it will say saving, and then it will disappear. And now I have this indicator up here that says last saved now. This is really important if you are in a place, like sometimes my home, where the internet occasionally goes out, because you can always check to make sure that it is constantly saving. If for some reason your internet goes out or your computer disconnects from the internet, you'll start seeing that, saving ... saving ... up here, and you'll know that you have a problem. Once you click save that first time, you don't have to click it again. Sefaria will automatically save. And so that's really important to do right away. Sometimes we get emails about people who lost their work on Sefaria, and we can't go in and pull that out if you didn't click save. Not even our very talented engineers can do that. So go ahead and click save, and that way your sheet will exist. So now you've started a sheet, and again, you've checked that you're logged in. You can only do this on the website, not on the app. So that's important to know also if you're someone who uses Sefaria from your phone or anything like that. So you can now go ahead and create resources on this sheet. So the first option is to add a source. Again, adding a source means that you're adding something from the Sefaria library. So I can type in, for example, Genesis, I start typing in Genesis, and you can see that Sefaria gives me that suggestion. So I'll click Genesis, and I'll type 1 through 10. And then you can either hit enter or click add source. Now that source is on my sheet. So that's one easy way to add a source to my source sheet. The other thing that you can do is you can click the Browse Sources button. If you're not exactly sure, like you remember that something is kind of know where it is, but you're not exactly sure of the reference, you're not confident enough to type it in, then you can click to browse the sources. For example, I could browse through the Talmud, And I could decide that I want a short section from the beginning of the entire Talmud, the beginning of Brachot. So again, each time I just click to select the reference that I want. And then you can just click and drag to select as much of the text as you want. You can see where it says Brachot 2a, 1 through 3. That number will keep changing as I scroll further. So I've got 1 through 5, and I'll click OK. And now that's been added to my source sheet. The other possibility is that you could add a text rather, to a sheet directly from Sefaria's library. So if, for example, I just happen to be reading through a text on Sefaria, I will take us to our calendar page and say that maybe I happen to be reading through this week's Torah portion, which I click to from our library. And I could decide I actually want to put some of the verses from this week's Torah portion onto my source sheet. Click to open the sidebar. One of the options in the sidebar is Sheets. So I might just want to add this verse. And you can see Sefaria says the selected citation is Genesis 25:19. Or I could click and drag to get a longer citation. And now you can see it says Genesis 25:19 through 23. And then I can decide which sheet I'd like to add this text to. Actually, I can see it doesn't know that I'm logged into my education account, so I'm going to refresh that. But if you only have one account, then you won't ever have that problem. So Sefaria will let me put it on my Sheets webinar webpage or onto any other sheet that I've ever created. I'll click Add to Sheet. And now when we go back to this page and refresh it, because my internet is running a little slow because of Zoom, it will appear on the source sheet. So you can just do that anytime. And that will, oh no, I added it to the other sheet. Sorry, I added it to this one actually. Even more fun, it's on our outline page now. There we go. This week's Torah portion on our outline page, so you won't forget what week you went over this outline. So that's another way to do it. And again, it just depends on where you are, where you're located in Sefaria as you're creating this source sheet. It's sometimes easier to add from the library if you want to do more browsing or more reading and you're not exactly sure what citation you want to add, then that's sometimes a really easy way to do that. I'm pausing to see if there are any questions about any of that I should go over again. Okay, Lauren's not yelling at me about anything, so that seems fine. Great. So that's how you add a source to your source sheet. And again, a source is anything that appears in Sefaria's library, which is a lot and constantly growing. And but again, you shouldn't feel limited if there's something that doesn't appear in the library. We'll get to that momentarily. Now that I've added some sources to my sheet, you can see that there's a new option here, which is connection. If I click on any source that's already on my source sheet, let's say Genesis 1 through 10, and I'm clicking on the plus button here because I want to add another source, you can see that the connection button comes up, and that's just going to pull in the information from that Sefaria sidebar and give me the option to add any text that Sefaria knows about that's connected to these sources. Oh, and I should always remember not to use Genesis as an example because it takes forever to pull up all the connections because there are so many to the beginning of the book of Genesis. But that's okay, you'll get the idea. You can do that with any source. Just again, click on the plus button if you don't see that add module and click on connection. And Sefaria will tell you about all of the connections that it knows about that exist. So this was a piece of Talmud. I could add Rashi on the Talmud. I just click on Rashi. Now there's a box around it. And I click add to sheet, and I've added that source to the sheet. Of course, you could also add that connection from within the library itself. Same idea as what I showed earlier. Click on the text to open the sidebar, click to open the comment that you're interested in, and then you have this option of add to sheet. So anytime you're in that mode of learning on Sefaria, you could always just grab a text and put it on a sheet. which is another reason I think to think of these sheets not as formal source sheets, the way you might think of it if you were using scissors and tape and a piece of paper, but to think of it as a place of collecting your thoughts, a place of collecting your ideas, because you can always go back in and edit it. And it's really very easy to just drop things onto a Sefaria sheet anytime that you are, anytime that you're kind of journeying or learning through our library. So those are all different ways to add a source to your sheet. What's important to remember as well is that Sefaria sheets are always linked to the library. And so anytime you add a text to a Sefaria sheet, you will then be able to find that sheet when you go back into the text. So, for example, if I click on, sure, why not, the beginning of this week's Torah portion, sheets are one of the options in the sidebar. And all of the sheets that you're seeing on the side here are sheets that quote this verse. They're sheets from a lot of different people. They have a lot of different titles, but they're all there because they quote this verse that I've clicked on. And if I create a sheet that quotes this verse, the first sheets that I'll see will actually be my sheets that I created, which I just want to say is really important if you are someone who does a lot of Torah creation, because you might not always remember. I feel like this is a big deal to say always in public, even though I've now said it in public a lot of times. I will only speak in the I. I don't always remember when I have created resources about a particular text. And so I am very grateful to find them in that sidebar and be reminded that I actually already created something that has this resource. Plus, it's a lot of fun to see all the other sheets that other people have created and get a sense of what do people talk about when they talk about, for example, Parshat Toldo. Lots of different titles here, lots of different personalities, and all of these are resources that are available in our library and available for you to be able to adapt as you wish. So just as the texts are there for you to use, the sheets are also there for you to use. And I will show that in just a moment. I'm pausing for any other burning questions. No, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, excuse me, my voice is terrible right now. Hi. There we go. So there was a question in the chat about if you click connections on a source sheet, is there a way to pare down which connections get put on the sheet? So for example, the one that you did pulled in like 12 Rashis. Maybe I just want the 5th Rashi. How do you do that?
Sure, I'll show deleting in a second.
Well, right, I know how to delete, but there's no way to do it right off the bat. Okay,
if you add it that way, there's no way to pare it down. And that's why I would say, if you only want the one Rashi, probably don't add that way.
Okay, thank you.
I think that feature is more like the way I imagine it. Okay, maybe I should have said more by way of introduction, right? I'm a teacher, and I think like a classroom teacher often, right? So I imagine that as I'm teaching my students this week's Torah portion with Rashi, and then I want to sort of bring in Rashi wholesale, as opposed to I want to pull out this one comment.
Right, thank you.
Great. So that's adding a text to your source sheet, again, both from within the sheet itself, as well as from within the Sefaria library. And you should also treat these source sheets as text that you can use. So when you click on a source sheet to open it, you can read through it. That's great. You might get inspiration. Any one of these sources, whether it comes from our library or not, can be added to your source sheet. Just click on the source, you'll see the sidebar. And again, click on sheets and you can add it to any source sheet that you have, or use the drop-down menu and you'll eventually, when you scroll through all your source sheets, even have the option of being able to create a new source sheet if you want to, that has that source on it. Okay. In full disclosure, this is Sefaria's corporate education account. And so to the extent that we have corporate anything, and so that's why we have so many source sheets, it's not just me, but you can also name a new sheet here and actually create from this sidebar experience. The other thing that you can do with a sheet, again, if you're logged in to your account, is you can click this little down arrow up here and choose to copy the sheet, meaning I want to make my own copy that's going to appear then in my Sefaria account that I can adapt and edit as I wish. Or I can view the source sheet in the editor if I want to copy one of these sources. It's just another way to copy another one of these sources into my source sheet. As I hover over, you get that little 2 squares image and it says copy to sheet. And that's another way to work with it. So you should really think of the sheets in our library as something that you can also use as you're adding sources to your source sheet. They're very much there for you to use and reuse. So again, you just need to be logged in, and then you can adapt. You can work on your own source sheets. You can adapt other people's source sheets. Any sheet that you make can be a mashup of your own material and other materials that you find on the site. So that's adding a source to the source sheet. As I mentioned, you can also add other kinds of materials. So with the plus button, which again shows up between any 2 sources, you can add a text to Sefaria's library, to Sefaria's source sheets. So anything that you can copy, paste, or type from anywhere else on the internet or on your hard drive or wherever you may be getting it from, you can type in English or Hebrew. The Aleph A buttons will control what language you're using. So this again is for the piece from an article that you want to add, the paragraph from a book that's not on Sefaria. All of those things can be added here in the text box. It can also just be a place for me to type my own text. So I'll do that as a placeholder. Writing type my own text. You need to click add to sheet, and then you can add it to the sheet. Media is the third option here. Again, because a Sefaria sheet is really a web page and it's really dynamic and it's really something that you can add to, you can add all kinds of things to it. So you can go ahead and put in a URL. I pulled up a Hanukkah video here. So I'll go to, this is just YouTube, I'm going to share. This is a YouTube feature, so I'm not on Sefaria right this second. I'm just going to grab the link to the YouTube video, and then I'll go back in here and paste the URL and click add to sheet. And now this video is actually embedded into my source sheet. I can play it without ever leaving the source sheet. It'll just play in the context of Sefaria's sheet. Another option, of course, is to add a SoundCloud link or an MP3. So here's a 929 audio recording that I've got queued up, and I'll click the share button there also. I'll copy it, and I'm going to go back into Sefaria and put in the URL. I click add to sheet, and there again, the recording is there. This can be, of course, professional materials that you find on YouTube, on SoundCloud, wherever it is. It can also be your own recordings, your students' own recordings, anything that you've created or someone else you know has created that you want to load onto your sheet. I'm pausing for questions in case there are any about either of those 2 features.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure. Did it come in on chat yet?
A variation of it came in on chat, but I want to expand the question here, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I know that in addition to the classic commentaries on any given primary source in Sefaria, there's also the existing connections to other sheets as well as external web pages. And so what I had asked earlier, and Lauren hopefully answered, was that the web pages are not connected with the plus feature. But I guess my question is if there was something I wanted to add from an external source that's already linked to Sefaria, is there a way to kind of keep that bridge somehow, or am I just or do I need to sort of add it as plain text in using the text feature? I'm not entirely sure if that was the clearest question.
Yeah, I think so. There's not a way to add it internally.
Okay.
So it would be the same as adding any other outside text. The only thing that I would say, and I would say that about really all of this, is do you really need to add it to the source sheet, or do you just want to help people find it? So if you're printing, which I'll talk about in a second, then yeah, you want to add it to the sheet. If you're not printing and everybody is in the same setup that we are all in right now, I'm in front of a screen, you're in front of a screen, you don't necessarily need it on there because every text on a Sefaria sheet is still a link. So I'm not going to pick Rashi because I'm not confident that there's an outside article there. Let's say, where's one of my larger texts? Here we go. Let's say it's the Talmud and Brachot. When I click on the heading, Sefaria opens the text in full. And when I click on the text, I get the full sidebar. So I'm actually probably not going to stress very much about having every possible connection to this text that I might want to teach, or even that I do want to teach on this page, because this page is really just a placeholder. It's just a starting point. It's not a place where I'm going to put everything that I want, unless, of course, I'm printing it, or unless I'm giving it to my students to do kind of independently without me. Again, even then, I might include instructions for how to access this. So to answer your question more specifically, there is no way, there's no special way to add this to the sheet. There's just a knowledge that you can tell people, here's how you find it, even if I haven't put it on the sheet.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers the question. Great. Keep those questions coming via chat, guys, and I will try to keep cycling back to them. But I do want to show you the other features of adding to a Sefaria sheet. So we have source, and we have text, and we have media, and I also showed you connections. And now we'll talk about adding a comment. Oh, actually, I should show on media also, although I don't have a great way to show this. It'll be different on all of your computers, but the other option for media is to click upload an image. And so you can upload an image. Again, that can be a great photo that you've taken recently. It can be a photo that you access through a Google search. It can be a piece of artwork that you created that you've taken a picture of with your phone and that you can now upload to the sheet, or a piece of artwork that your children created that you now want to upload to the sheet. It can be any image file is fine there, and you can add it to the sheet and it'll appear. I think I definitely showed one sheet like that. Let's see, right? This one, people and nature, is a great example of what it looks like to have media embedded, specifically photographs embedded inside a sheet. Once you have all these components on your sheet, then you can play with the different menu options, which I won't go through all of because most of them are pretty self-explanatory, but I'll at least point you towards them. I'm going to move right to left actually on this. The insert menu gives you all of the options that I already mentioned. So instead of clicking the plus button, you can just go to the insert menu to insert source, text, comment, and media, plus the insert Parsha button. So if you are looking to teach the entirety of the Torah portion, or you're working with a bar bat mitzvah student and you'd like to put in the entirety of the Torah portion, you can click on the Parsha button and select any Parsha by name and add it to the sheet. So that's just an easy addition to the add, but insert is the same as that plus menu that appears between every source on your source sheet. Format, there are some things you can play with. You can sub out divine names. You can number and box your sources. You can add the Siyata Dishmaya to the corner of your sheet. These things, not all of them will show up on the library view once you're finished editing your source sheet and you switch to view in library. Not all of them will show up that way, so you can play with that. As our source sheet editor goes into its next version, which is coming soon, there'll be some options added and some moved around, but this is the way it exists right now. And the one that we get the most questions about is really substituting out the divine names. So that's something that you can play with. And then down here, it's important to notice the sheet language options. This is something that, again, is really, really different between creating a source sheet on, let's say, Microsoft Word and creating a source sheet on Sefaria. I made this as a bilingual source sheet. You're all my students for today, and I don't know whether you're more comfortable in Hebrew or English or both. So I made this source sheet bilingual, and hopefully that is as inclusive as I can currently get on Sefaria, because we don't have other languages yet, although that's coming hopefully eventually. But I might decide in the future that I actually want to teach this entirely in English, and then I can change it to being an English-only source sheet. I haven't deleted anything. The time after that, when I want to teach it bilingual again, I'll just click bilingual. The source sheet's potential exists in all languages at all times. Or I could decide I'm going to teach it entirely in Hebrew, and I can switch it to being a Hebrew sheet. But let me go back into bilingual so you can see all the options. Once I choose bilingual, you can change the layout, stacked or side by side for your English and Hebrew. If you're choosing the side by side, which is always my favorite, you can choose to have Hebrew on the left or Hebrew on the right, just depending on your own preference. You're controlling how you view the sheet. If you share this source sheet digitally, the people who are consuming it will control how they view the sheet. which means that I can decide I really like having my Hebrew and English side by side, and I like them laid out this way. And I can give my students the option to put them the other way because it's easier for them to look at it that way. So when I'm sharing my screen, I obviously control what you're looking at. But when I give you the link to the source sheet to view on your own, you get to decide how you want to view the sheet when you're in this library mode. If I click on a source, so there it is, I've clicked on it, and you can tell that I've clicked into it effectively because there's a blue box around it. Now a few things happen. In the format menu, have more options here. I can choose to add a source title to this sheet, to the source. So I could call this, we'll call it my first source. And now that's there. You can choose the source language for just this text. So Hebrew, English, bilingual, the layout, you can customize all of that. You can also reset the source text if you've made changes to it. You can remove the vowels from it if you'd like to. You can play with the segmentation of the text. In this case, it'll segment it into verses because that's how it exists in the library. So Sefaria will break it down that way. And so again, I encourage you to just play with those different options. Of course, once you click on a text in your sheet, it's also editable. And that's a really important distinction between looking at a text in the library and looking at it on a sheet. On a sheet, it is something that you can change. So when people tell me, I really want to use Sefaria, but I don't love the translation, there are some words that I would change. Great, go ahead, put it on your source sheet and change it. Anytime you see the blue box around the source, that means that you can type and you can change it and do what you want to do with it. And also when you click into the source and get that blue box, you'll see this editing bar, which is pretty standard for any kind of word processing platform. So should be familiar to you, lets you do things like add links and bold and colors and things like that that you might want to change about a particular text. And then finally, we have the file menu, which most of these things are going to be pretty self-explanatory. I particularly just want to draw your attention, though, to two of them right now. Three of them, actually. One is export to Google Drive, which is the best answer to the question of how do I print from Sefaria. You can print directly from Sefaria. You can print directly from any website, but you might not be super happy with the way that the layout works. And so the best thing to do if you want to print is to export your sheet to Google Drive, which will then allow you to play with all of the options that you're used to from Google Docs. It'll just recreate this sheet as a Google Doc, and it'll be easier to work with in terms of formatting for printing. So that's export to Google Drive, which is really the best possible way of printing. The other option that I'll point to here is embedding the sheet, which if you have any kind of web page, you have a blog, you have a class website, you have a school website, anything like that. I know this looks scary, or I think this looks scary because I'm not an engineer, but I promise you if you're using any kind of platform that lets you embed, all you have to do is copy and paste this inexplicable piece of code into your site, and it will let you embed the sheet so that you can actually scroll through the Sefaria sheet without leaving whatever website it is. And that's a really fun thing. Print is here, but again, not so really exciting because I encourage you to print from Google Drive if you care at all about what it looks like. And the other option here that's I think really important for our purposes today is tagging, because when you tag a sheet, that's how you let people know how to find your sheet. It's also how you make your sheet findable to you again in the future. So it's going to be really important for me to know that this is a sample sheet. So I'll type sample sheet, that I created it for a webinar. I typed webinar. Maybe none of those are trending tags on Sefaria, but they're at least important for me. If I tagged it something like creation, I'd probably get a lot more eyes on it, right? And that if that's a goal of mine, then I'll want to put that tag there as well. And then I can click save. And now the sheet will be tagged with all of those tags. Again, findable for me and findable for other people as well. I'm going to pause for questions.
How would you use tags to find it yourself?
Great question. I'm going to show that in 1 second when I go back into your account. Any other burning questions?
Can I ask a question? Can you hear me?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I was answered. I put something on the chat, and that is, if I wanted mostly my own text and I wanted all these sources to be on the bottom of the sheet, like footnotes, or maybe my sources will be on, at the end, the last 2 pages, and the first 4, 6 pages might be my own. Is that possible to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Any other burning questions? Then I'll answer all of those. Okay, great. So let's talk about what to do now that you've built this sheet. And okay, maybe you've outsourced it in some way, maybe you've embedded it, or you've printed it. But assuming that we're still working with this sheet digitally, there's a few more things you can do. First of all, you'll notice that when you hover over, I guess if you're watching my screen, you'll notice that when I hover over any text, right, anytime my mouse kind of like touches a text, I get this menu. One option is to copy a source to another sheet. Why would you want to do that? So many reasons, but the one that comes up the most for me is that I've added an outside text. So I've added my favorite paragraph from Heschel's The Sabbath, and I know I'm going to want to use that multiple times. Once I've typed it out, I don't need to type it out again. I can just copy it from one sheet to another using that button. You can remove a source from a source sheet. So I mentioned that in answer to Zoe's question before, that you can always remove a source just using that minus button. You can indent or outdent a source. And this is partially an answer to your question, you can always move a source up or down. So the order in which I place sources is not the order in which they have to stay. Because sometimes as I'm adding sources to a sheet, it's just a stream of consciousness thing. It's like as they occur to me. And then when I actually am going to present it, I want to completely reconstruct what I've done. So you can click and drag to move sources, or you can use those arrows to move sources up and down. And those are all ways, again, of kind of constructing things on the sheet, moving things around, playing with what they look like. Nothing is set in stone, or even, I don't know, set in typeface, right? Whatever the writing equivalent is. You can always move features around and move the sources up and down and take things off and add more things as you wish. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. The other thing, which I mentioned in passing, and I won't spend a lot of time on because it's really not a Sefaria feature so much as it is a feature of just being on the internet, but you can always link. You can always add a link. And that's, I think, important in the kind of case where maybe I have some sources here, but there's more to be seen. I might actually link to another source sheet. That's something that I do a lot. I know we have a lot of users who do it a lot. Like, here's the short version of my sheet, or here's the my take plus 2 sources version that you can also put in links. Or you could say in your prose, to understand this better, see Leviticus 10:12, and then just have that link to, for example, Leviticus 10:12. So those are all options as well. What does all this look like once you've created it? You can click to view the sheet in the library, and this means I'm done editing it, and this is what my sheet actually looks like. Again, actually looks like to me right now, but I can always adjust how I want that to look. I can always decide I want it all in English or all in Hebrew when I'm actually viewing it. So that's the library view. I'm going back into edit. You can also then click to see the sheet in your account. So when you click on that little icon, again, you get back out to your account. This is the answer to how to find your source sheets, which I think was a question that Lauren read out to me earlier. And it's also an answer to the question of why would I want to tag my sheets for my own use? I'm in Sefaria's education account. I haven't counted, but at least hundreds of source sheets in this account. If I want to find every source sheet that my team and I have ever made about Hanukkah, I'll click on this search bar and I'll type in Hanukkah. And now Sefaria is showing me just the source sheets that I've made that have Hanukkah in the title or are tagged Hanukkah. And I can add whatever tags I want. If I teach 7th grade and 8th grade, I can add 7th grade and 8th grade tags so that I can find the different versions that I've made for the different grades. If I teach in 2 different venues, I can tag that. If I teach the Torah portion of the week, I can tag by Torah portion. So this is what I mean when I say that you can find things that you've tagged. And if you are a high volume sheet creator, then I highly recommend this feature because it's just think of it as a way of kind of organizing your own internal files so that you can find whatever you want to afterwards. This account page is really where you do all of your sort of your own personal things on Sefaria. But then what happens if you want to share a sheet out with somebody else? That's a case that comes up a lot. Again, one way is by printing, but you may not want to print, you may want to share it digitally. So I'm going to go back into the edit mode again by clicking on that little down arrow, and I can click to edit the sheet. And the option you have here next to view in library is share. Share is the button that allows you to write a summary, again, add tags. This is also where you decide whether you want to list your sheet on Sefaria or not. So toggle between yes and no. You can share your sheet into a group, which maybe I'll show briefly if we have a moment. And here's where you get the link to the sheet. This link is just like any other link. It's like sharing a product on Amazon. I can chat it to you guys in the Zoom chat, which I did at the beginning of this webinar. I can WhatsApp it to you. I can text it to you. I can email it to you. I can post it on Facebook or Instagram. Any way that you share information digitally is a great way to share out this sheet. And you can also choose whether anyone who has access can view your sheet. They're just a reader. Whether they can add to your sheet if you want to create something collaborative like what I showed earlier, or whether they can edit your sheet so they can actually make changes to it. Note that Sefaria does not save past versions of the sheet, so use that one only if you really trust the person or people that you're sharing it with to not make any changes that you would not want. And then click save to preserve those settings. Sefaria is excited and giving me the option to make this sheet public. I will click maybe later because I'm not sure this one is quite ready for prime time yet. Okay, I'm pausing for questions, and then I want to show you one more thing, and then we'll wrap up. Lauren, anything unanswered coming through the chat?
No, as far as I know. I mean, others, if you feel like your questions weren't answered properly, please feel free to share. There was one question, I think, which was about knowing what to put in text versus what to put in comment, and if there's a functional difference.
Yeah, it doesn't make a big difference putting things in text versus comment, other than if you choose to number your sources, Sefaria will number anything that you've indicated as a text. It will not number your comments. So that's the main difference. I mentioned earlier, we're always in the process of revising products at Sefaria, and there will be, before too long, a new version of this editor, which will make it, I think is going to collapse that difference, right? Because it's really not so different. They both give you a text box. It's just a difference when it comes to numbering your sheets, to numbering your sources. So that's really the only difference there.
One other question maybe, Sarah, I would ask, and maybe a follow-up to that question. First of all, I think there might also be a formatting difference. Maybe you can format more I'm not sure about that.
Possibly, not sure.
But can you hide, someone had asked, can you hide the comments? So maybe you put in the comment, like my teacher's comments, like you have a teacher version and student version.
Yeah, you can't do that, although it's not an unfamiliar request. The best way to do that, I would say, is to actually make two versions, which is super easy, right? File, copy sheet. So I almost always do that when I teach, that I have a teacher version and a student version. My comments are on the teacher version, and I let often my students comment on the student version. And so that would be a way to do that. We do have a few other features that are more educator specific, and for that I would refer you to our educator page. Lauren, maybe you could stick a link in the chat, or to one of our educator webinars, which we don't have one scheduled right now, but stay tuned. We do those from time to time. So yes, I'd put that question in that category. I'll just say one thing briefly before we wrap up about groups on Sefaria, because that was one of the options that you see in the share button. Sefaria has the option to group and brand your sheets. So it's sefaria.org/groups. These are our public groups. I'm showing them to you because they're public. I can't show you our private groups, but you don't have to make a group public, just the way you don't have to make a sheet public. And you can see they're from a very diverse range of organizations, schools, individuals who just wanted to group their sheets together. I don't even know what some of these are. They're new. That's fun. And it can be your entire organization, or it can be a single class. So for example, this is GW Hillel. I don't think it's every sheet they've ever made, but these are sheets that were made by their senior Jewish educator for their Hillel. And it's a space where anyone can go and see the Torah that's being put out by this organization. And when you click on any one of the sheets, you'll see that it's branded. It has a link actually to the group. And in many cases, the groups themselves then link to the website. And it's just a great way to, again, both brand and really contain materials. So I often do this for classes when I'm teaching my, I guess most recently, my 11th grade Talmud class. I will name the class, and then all my materials for that class go in that group. That way it's sort of one-stop shopping. My students only have one link to go to find all my materials. It's just the URL of the group page. And depending on the class, I either do or don't give my students the option to also share materials into the group. But you can decide using members, you can decide who's going to be a member of that group. If you're the owner of the group, then you can decide who to add and what the settings should be, whether it should be public or private. But I did want to just mention that because, again, when you click on share for your sheet, that's one of the options, is to be able to put your sheet into a group that you belong to and that you have access to publishing for. Okay, I am going to open it up one last time for questions. And just tell you again, because people are welcome to jump off, that we do other webinars. We have a general webinar coming up soon. And also want to mention, in case you don't know, Sefaria is a not-for-profit organization. We welcome donations. There's a link on the sheet that I shared with you, or you can click make a donation on the Sefaria library page. Important to keep in mind because just you should know that we're a service to the community. And also, again, knowing that our texts are all either in the Creative Commons, licensed Creative Commons, or in the public domain. And so when you ask yourself the question, why doesn't Sefaria have this text? Often the answer is copyright. So we love your support in all sorts of ways, whether it's a donation or whether you just want to send us a note telling us what you love and what you'd like to see on the site. We really value all those kinds of feedback. And now I'll pause for any final questions.
Where can we find the recording of this?
Great question. I believe everyone who registered is going to get an email. Lauren, is that correct? Yes, great.
Great, thanks.
Sure. Any other last questions? Wonderful. Then I will wish you.
Oh, we should also, Sarah, do we want to invite folks to the Facebook group?
To the what? Oh, to the Facebook group. Sure, absolutely. Why don't you put a link in the chat before we sign off? Sefaria has a new Facebook group for, especially for educators or anyone who shares Torah regularly. And you're all welcome to join us there, where we talk about everything from like the technical questions of like, how do I do this, to like making a great source sheet on this, to like, does anybody have any thoughts about this issue? So we'd be happy to see you all there. And I hope to see you all around Sefaria.